Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Sky Observers Hangout. We're so glad. Hi there. We're so glad you are with us today. My name is Michelle, and I am the Director of Public Observing at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago.
And my name is Adriana, and I am the Astronomy Educator at the Adler. We've also got some friends joining us behind the scenes. As our YouTube chat moderator, we have Megan. And Aubrey. Thank you. Last minute change of plans.
So just to prove, it is not an AI. It is actually a person on the other end. So you are interacting with an actual person. No, it is Aubrey this evening. Hi, Aubrey.
Hi, Aubrey. And also in the chat is our astronomer friend, Geza, who I like to call Stargazer.
Don't we all?
So if you see a name with a blue wrench next to it in the chat, that is Geza helping us by answering your questions and comments.
And now Sky Observers Hangout is a place for all of us to gather together and completely nerd out about the sky. Our goal is to give you practical tips that you can find useful about lots of things related to sky observing. If you want to just watch the show, totally fine. We would love to see your questions and comments in the chat. This is a live show as it is happening. We want to interact with you. So feel free to interact with us and with each other during the show.
Absolutely. So tell us, to get the chat started, where are you tuning in from? Let us know in the chat.
Yep, we're going to call you out in just a sec. So yeah, tell us where you're saying hello from. And while the Adler Planetarium's doors must remain closed, we are doing our best to keep our virtual doors open and creating and sharing some out of this world content for you. If you wouldn't mind, use the link that Aubrey is going to put in the chat in just a sec to pay what you feel is comfortable contributing to help support our programming. And thank you so much for allowing us to keep sharing our universe with you.
And you can help us get more visibility for our shows by hitting subscribe for the Adler Planetarium's YouTube channel right below this video. If you like us, give us a thumbs up too. We are super excited to see all of these folks hanging out with us tonight. We have folks coming in from, Wisconsin. Bernie Fish from down the street in Chicago. Hello, neighbor. A friend from Eldon, Wilmington. Greetings from the Belmont Harbor Observatory. Hi, Steve.
Oh, we know Steve. Hi, Steve.
And we've got a friend from Ohio, too. So glad to see people tuning in from all sorts of places. Oh, hello from Scotland. Hi. Welcome.
One of the places I so want to visit someday. So keep the home fires burning for us in Scotland till we can come visit you in person. That would be great. Ooh, it'd be great to do a Sky Observers Hangout on location, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Someday.
Would love to.
That'd be cool. Go out in the highlands, look where the sky is dark. Oh, that'd be awesome. Anyway, that's for the future. All right. Anybody else we want to identify before we go on with the show?
Avery and Brett from Elk Ridge, Maryland.
Oh, welcome.
Thanks for joining us too.
Welcome, Maryland. All right.
We're glad you're all here.
Yeah. Well, we have a few other people we would like to bring in. So we have some folks who are joining us in the show to help us out with the show. Tonight, we're talking all about telescopes. We get so many questions about telescopes all throughout the year. You guys email us all the time. And especially when people want to purchase a telescope for someone, or they want to buy their first telescope, or maybe they're looking for an upgrade. And so we want to give you some opinions on the telescopes that we use and give you some insight into how you might go choosing a telescope yourself. Now, there is no way on this planet that we could cover every telescope out there on the market. There are just too many. So we're going to limit our conversation to the telescopes we use on a regular basis. But if you have a telescope that you really like, please share that in the chat. When this video is done, it's still going to be up there. The chat will still be there. So anyone watching this video, they'll see your chat comments as they play it. So share your favorite telescope and why in the chat. We would love to see that, but please include the reason why you like that telescope. All right, now to start off, we have created a Choose Your Telescope tool to help you find your way through some of the options that are out there. These are options based on the telescopes we use as part of our Adler Planetarium programs. Again, it doesn't cover every telescope option out there, but it does help you narrow things down just a bit based on the scopes that we have. Now, Aubrey is going to put a link to that tool in the chat in just a sec. So we're going to give her a chance to be able to do that. Now, we have some special guests with us tonight. First, joining us on the show is Mark Benson. He is an Adler Planetarium Telescope volunteer, a Jet Propulsion Laboratory Solar System ambassador. Mark, you need like a sash or something to go along with that.
Yeah,
And he is... Yeah, I bought the other shirt, right. And he is host of his own public telescope observing programs in Oak Park, which is a suburb just west of Chicago. Hi, Mark.
Yay, hello. Thanks for having me on here.
No problem. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we also have another Adler Telescope volunteer who's been with us for 17 years. Thanks for still hanging out with us, John. So John helps out with a lot of our nighttime observing events. Welcome, John Napolitano.
Great to see you guys. Thank you for having me on.
And we have another person. Adriana, would you like to introduce him?
Another longtime Adler Telescope volunteer who's helped with many of our Scopes in the City programs and nighttime programs. We have with us Andy Salata. Hi, Andy.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back with the Adler for at least a little bit, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, we are so glad you guys could join us. So kick us off, Adriana. We're going to get into this telescope chat.
Would love to. All right, so Mark and John and Andy, we're going to use the telescopes we all have with us here to help our viewers understand a bit more about scopes, since someone might want to purchase a telescope in the future, maybe in the near future, maybe for the holidays. I don't know, just a suggestion. But between the five of us, we have 15 telescopes to choose from.
That was not a voice typo either. I want to emphasize this. Between the five people on this show, there are 15 telescopes that we have to show you. When I added those up, it was absolutely mind-boggling. But first thing I want to do is talk about the different types of telescopes. If you are new to telescopes, you're going to come across some terms that you're going to go, I don't know what that is. So first thing I want to show is a telescope called a refractor. And so that is this one. I'm going to turn my computer just a bit and I'm going to stand up. Okay, and I'm gonna move my chair just out of the way, just a second. All right, so this is a refractor. So basically the way a refractor works is the light comes in through this end and there's a lens at this end. The light comes down the tube and you can put your eyepiece down at this end, the part that you look through. So I don't have the eyepiece inside this one, but this is a typical eyepiece right here. So, a refractor, lens at the front, eyepiece at the back. So a telescope, when you imagine a telescope, like if I say the word telescope, I'll betcha that's kind of the type that maybe comes to your mind first, right? This particular one I'm not going to talk about during the show because this exact one is made for looking at exactly one thing, and that is the sun. So it's super specific, a little too specific for this show. If you want to know about it, maybe we can do a future show about that sort of thing. But at least wanted to mention it as to why I've got it. It's a refractor, but our friends have other refractors that we're going to talk about. But just to show you how old this telescope design is, I'm going to share my screen, and I want to show you a picture of the oldest telescope in the Adler Planetarium's collection. This telescope is also a refractor. You can see the lens at the place where the lens would go at the front, and the eyepiece is the part at the back. It expands outward. This telescope was built approximately 1630, 1640, something like that. The telescope was invented in 1608. So this telescope is approximately contemporary to Galileo himself. Not the guy, he didn't invent the telescope, but he made the telescope really good. So this is a cool object that we have in our collection. I just wanted to show you that this telescope design goes way back. So there we go. All right. So Adriana, go ahead.
The next telescope design we have is a reflector, and I have a tabletop version of that right here. Oops, I almost lifted the entire table instead of just the telescope because it's so small. All right, so this right here, it's so cute. It's my little friend. So if you look right here, you might notice in the background that we've got a mirror back there. That is, of course, why it's called a reflecting telescope. So a reflector uses a curved mirror at the back. It's kind of shaped like a bowl. Less dramatic, but the same shape. The light comes into the open end of the tube and it travels all the way back to that curved mirror at the other end. Then the light reflects off of that mirror in a cone shape to a mirror that's right here in the front, and then that redirects the light out of the eyepiece on the side. All right. And then this is the eyepiece. That is where your eye goes. So this type of telescope wasn't originally designed by Isaac Newton, but he was the first person to get this kind of telescope to work. So we call this a Newtonian telescope.
And I have the third kind right here, so it's right back behind me. By the way, I want to stop for just a second. I know that there were some people in the chat that might have been having a little trouble with the telescope, choose a telescope tool. So I'm going to tell Aubrey and Geza, if you guys, or if people are still having trouble with that, let me know, because it may just be the link. So let me fix that if necessary. So I may have to like multitask and fix that. So let me know in Slack if we can do that. So sorry, behind the scenes kind of talk there, because we're not all in the same place if you haven't noticed. So anyway, we want to make sure you guys can access that. I can see Gaze is typing right now, so they'll let me know if I need to fix that link. So anyway, third kind of telescope, this one. You will see behind every single one of us, we have this telescope right here. This is called a catadioptric. And this is basically a combination of a lens and a mirror. So there's a lens at the front, so the light comes in this way, and the mirror is at the back. So the light comes in this way, bounces off the mirror, comes back this way. There's a secondary mirror here that sends light back through a hole in the main mirror, and you put the eyepiece back here. And so what that means is you've got a nice short telescope. All right. So anyway, it is it basically makes the telescope a lot smaller than one of these others that we have here. And I see that people are still having trouble with the link. So give me a second. I'm going to turn things over to Adriana to start off with our conversation here. And Adriana, I'll let you know when I'm done. So fixing
Sounds
that
good.
link. So go for it. Take it away.
So we are going to do a bit of a round robin through all of us to talk about the telescopes that we have, some pros and some cons, and why we chose the telescopes that we have. If you have questions for us, please put those in the chat. I have already seen some questions in our chat that we can get started talking about. And our first question is going to relate to that. So I see somebody's asking, someone's very interested in space. We are hoping Santa helps us pick one for Christmas, pick a telescope for Christmas. So what's a good telescope for beginners? That ties right into our first question, which is, what was everybody's first telescope? So I'm going to turn it over to John. Can you tell us about your first telescope?
Absolutely. Well, you're looking at it right here, this giant 10-inch Meade Starfinder.
That was your first telescope?
First telescope.
All downhill from there.
I did some homework, and the idea was to maximize aperture for your dollar. And so I got a big reflector.
Yeah, so when we talk about aperture, what we mean is the size of the mirror or the lens inside your telescope. That makes basically the diameter, the size across. So a bigger mirror or lens is going to gather more light, and that will help you see more detail in your image and get brighter images. Just to give a little bit of context about why a bigger aperture might be better. All right, turn it over to Mark. What was your first telescope?
Hello. So I had one as a kid. It would have been a small refractor on a little tripod. And I don't remember what kind it was or the size, but I had that. And then, but I also had a pair of binoculars. And so I know we're talking about telescopes, but a pair of binoculars, good binoculars, not even great binoculars, just good binoculars are actually a good place to start too, if you're not totally sure you want to do a telescope. So I know I have binoculars that I used to look at the moon, and a telescope to try to look at some other things. But yeah, I know I had one as a kid that was small, but no idea the brand or the actual size. But to bounce off what you said about the diameter, I always like to tell people that, because people have like funnels in their kitchen, and the larger the funnel, the more liquid or water you can pour into it, the funnel will catch. And the diameter of the telescope is basically a funnel for light. So that's kind of the way to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, can you tell us about your first telescope?
Well, my first telescope I got when I was a kid, right around time when Halley's Comet. So when I was 12, it was a nice 16 millimeter. I don't know the name, but it's about 2.5 inch. And this is all I have left is just the glass, because the
You
tripod.
still have it?
Wow.
The
You
tripod
took it
broke.
apart?
No, the tripod broke, and so the lenses are a little cracked, but I still kind of keep them just to remember. But it's funny because the eyepieces were the 0.965, so they don't even fit any of the new telescopes, which are usually 1.25 inches for the eyepiece. And it has one of those dangerous solar filters that you screw onto the eyepiece. I do have that eyepiece still somewhere in this house. So I was looking for it before, but at least I had the lenses. But I did get to learn how to use it before the tripod broke and it fell. So before, it used to be just great for the moon because I couldn't find anything else. The finder scope was never lined up right. But I finally learned, and then that's when I got, just like John, the 10-inch Dob that's all the way back here, the Dobsonian. So it's a reflector, but it's what everyone calls the light bucket, because I also wanted to get as much light as possible. And being a little older, I can carry it. But for someone who has kids, you might like a tabletop. But I do also have 10 by 50 millimeter binoculars. I had those actually before the Dobsonian. So I think a lot of us kind of graduated from little glass to bigger mirrors.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about my first telescope experience. It was also a big, giant telescope at the Adler. That's the first kind of telescope that I learned how to use. But since we're talking about telescopes for beginners, when I teach people how to use telescopes, I work with teens a lot, teaching them how to use their first telescope. We usually start with this guy. So it is relatively, it's incredibly portable. It's pretty small, but still gathers quite a bit of light. It's got a wide mirror, and they're not particularly expensive. So this is an Orion Sky Scanner 100. And when I'm teaching people, this is usually what I start with. So just to give at least one recommendation, but we'll talk a little bit more about it over the course of the show for sure.
And someone wanted to know about price ranges. Those little tabletop telescopes generally are like $150 or less. And some brands actually that I do mention in the Choose Your Telescope tool, you can get them even for less than $100. Now, that being said, you do get what you pay for. Not every telescope under $100 is actually worth it. So we did comb through some reviews anyway to be able to narrow the range down for that. But did we miss anyone for their first telescope? Except for me?
We missed you.
Oh, we missed me. Okay. So my first telescope, if I'm not mistaken, was my brother's telescope. So I just learned over the weekend that in my fuzzy brain from 30 plus years ago, that the first telescope I looked through was actually his. And so he's older than me, but it was just this little 2.25 inch refractor, meaning the main lens was 2.25 inches across. And we had one of those solar filters that you screwed into the eyepiece. Don't do that. Never, ever, ever do that. If you get an old telescope that has that, just use it as a museum piece or throw it away. Anyway, but yeah, that was my first telescope. That and a pair of binoculars as well. So anyway, well, that's really cool. It sounds like there's a lot of similarity, except for maybe Adriana. The first telescope she learned to use was a very large one.
A giant 8-inch refractor. But I still love to use those, so
Right.
no regrets.
Right. So we're going to talk about some pros and cons of the different telescopes that we have with us. So refractors. One of the first telescope ever made was a refractor. You go, oh, it's a 400-year-old design. Yeah, because it works. Refractors are generally a little more expensive than reflectors, but there are some reasons that we may or may not want to choose them. Andy, you have 2 refractors in your possession. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Why did you choose 2? Why do you like them? Anything that you want to say about those?
The first one was the 80 millimeter that I have here. 80 millimeters because, or a little over 3 inches because it was cheaper. But it's also always my favorite one because this is what I had taken with us to do eclipse in Wyoming. So I had a solar filter on it and I got to take pictures. And I kind of like the refractors because I can attach my DSLR to the back and I can do some easy photography. I'm not really good at it, so it's usually just like the moon or the sun, which are pretty easy. But I did get a 4-inch one, so it's just to kind of get a little bit more as I try and practice. And that's why it also has like 2 different mounts. I have my electronic go-to, so it's computerized and it will actually track, so I can take pictures without having lines, so not all stars will look like comets. And then, but you know, I think one of the things about telescopes is trying to find the easiest one, and that's why I have an alt-as where all I can do is take it out, point, and I don't have to worry about looking for the North Star to align anything. So if I want to just go out and just for like a few minutes, just to take a look at some craters on the moon, I can just grab a telescope on easy mount. So that's why I have 2. And sometimes it's just easier to carry the smaller one than the bigger one.
That's a good point. And he mentioned alt-as. That means altitude, up, down, azimuth, around, around. That's all that means. Is it's just a type of mount. And and the other one is called an equatorial, and that's just one of those. You probably have seen those. It has a counterweight at the other end, kind of balances out the telescope, and it essentially turns the telescope in a couple different directions. But you can line it up with the North Star, and then it only has to turn in one direction. So there are definitely different types of mounts out there. And you're going to hear us go back and forth, by the way, between millimeters, inches. We'll try to convert if we can, but that's always referring to the size of the main lens or the mirror. That's all. So that's the light gathering piece size. So John, you have a refractor, of a long one right there up on your, what is that, your right shoulder. So what is, yep, yeah, there you go. So why do you like that one? What's the deal with that particular behemoth?
One of the things I love about refractors is that they don't have a central obstruction. So as Adriana was showing us the reflector and that secondary mirror that's in there, you do lose some of the light gathering because of that central obstruction. It's just part of the design. And one of the beautiful things about refractors, and one of the things that makes them great for solar system observing, is that no central obstruction. And this is also pretty portable compared to the old 10-inch that I first bought, you know. So, but like you say, they are more expensive. This one was I bought on auction, and you know, it's worked out great. I didn't put a lot of money into the mount like Andy has his alt-as mount. This is also an alt-as. But I love the portability and the ease of use. I can just grab it and go out. It doesn't do anything. It's not motorized. It's not electronic. It's all, you find your way through the sky, but you get beautiful views for it. So
that's a really good point that you made, that you bought yours secondhand. And a lot of times telescopes generally can be fairly gently used. So if you can't find what you want to get on the primary market, some sort of secondary auction type or a secondary sale market might work, because people usually take good care of these things. And so that might be another option for folks, especially since telescopes are sold out everywhere right now. It is actually kind of hard to get one. So this current situation that we're in, people have been buying telescopes like crazy to be able to enjoy the sky. We love that, but it means you might have to wait a little longer to be able to find one. So all right. So Adriana, where are we going next?
Well, I was wondering if we could take a minute to answer some of these questions we're getting.
Go for it. That'd be
All
great.
right. So you got any advice on buying a telescope for astronomers in a location with a lot of light pollution? We live just outside of Baltimore. We know some stuff about light pollution in Chicago, don't we, you guys?
Baltimore, we gotcha. So any advice? Mark, you take your telescope out often in a light polluted area.
Yep.
Any advice for our friend from outside Baltimore?
So I think two pieces of advice. One, if we're talking about doing just stuff in your backyard or in your neighborhood for you, for your family, for friends, the concern about light pollution in terms of those purposes is a little bit larger than it needs to be. If you're just looking for yourself to have fun or learn a little bit or share with your kids, your family, if you have a good telescope, you're going to see more than you think you're going to see, despite the light pollution. If you're trying to do astro imaging, if you're trying to do research, if you're trying to do, more professional things, then it is a little bit more of a concern. But most people, including myself, are stunned by what they're able to see just from their backyard, despite the light pollution. So that's number one. Number two, you can't do anything about macro light pollution. Like, I'm just outside of Chicago. If I'm looking east, I can't do anything about the fact that the sky to the east always glows orange at night. It just always is going to be orange. I can't do anything about that, but you have to think more about the micro light pollution, and it actually makes a huge difference. Turn off your porch light if you take it outside. If you go to a park, don't go near a light pole. Set yourself up so that there's a building between you and a light pole. So it's just so the light is still going in the sky, but at least it's not glaring in your eyeball. When I go out on my back deck, I turn out my back porch light, but I also turn off the indoor portion of the porch. I turn off that light and the hallway light and the kitchen light at the end of the hall. Any light that could be in my peripheral vision, I turn it off. And the difference is pretty impressive, actually, just by shutting off the lights around you. If you know your neighbors well and you know you're going to be outside, ask them if they would mind turning off their light if they have one on. But you can control your area well enough to see things. The first time I looked from my backyard, I didn't really turn off the lights because I needed them on because I was still looking at the controls and trying to figure out what to see. I didn't realize I was going to see, I knew I was looking at Jupiter, but I didn't realize I was going to see 4 moons of Jupiter. And I had my porch light on. There was light there. The sky is orange because it's Chicago, and I still saw more than I anticipated. So I'm not saying don't worry about light pollution, but I think you'll be surprised. Don't let it deter you. You're going to be surprised at what you see.
Yeah. Michelle, you've also got, there's sort of a range of telescope size that might work best for somebody in light polluted skies, right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, if you've got the means, I would go for something like in the 4-inch to 8-inch range. Once you get up into like 10-inch, then you're just gathering more light pollution. So you're not really going to gain a whole heck of a lot if all you're going to be looking at is planets and moons and the moon and some nearby stuff, some brighter objects like that. So I wouldn't go any larger than an 8-inch to start with. I mean, if you're just starting out, I would go for 6-inch. That's what this one is right here. And so this telescope here, I can kind of point it down. There we go. This is a refractor as well. And so it is a 6-inch mirror, nice size, fairly portable. This thing comes apart in 2 pieces, fits in the back of the car. It's a nice size especially for a beginner. Shows you some deeper sky objects. But yeah, I really like this guy.
Great.
All right.
Let me take a look because I think we've got a couple other questions.
Cool.
Would you share the specifics on the shorter orange scope?
Oh, it's as if you were going on to our next section. Stay tuned. We're going to go to the specifics on that one in just a sec. So
we are. can Andy Salata tell us the cost of the telescopes he has behind him? Can you just do a quick point and price for us?
The 3-inch telescope, if you just buy the telescope alone, it is about $400 to $500. The mount is could be anywhere from $200 and up, depending on how sturdy you want the legs. I have a extension pole, so it's a little bit more. And then, of course, you always want a handle. Then the 4-inch, the telescope alone was $1,000. And then the mount, since it's a go-to, it actually comes out to be around $700 and up, depending on this. The Skyview here is a nice size. It can hold up to about 20 pounds. So I don't have any problems. And actually, when I got the package, I got it with the 3-inch Orion here. So sometimes when you buy the package, it's a little less. So I didn't have to pay as much for both the telescope and the mount. But what's cool is, as you can see, you can interchange them. So as you build on them, or if you do trade up for a different size, if you don't grow too sentimentally attached to it, there's a lot of places that do where you can get used telescopes. But the refractors are the more expensive ones, because as you hear about if you ask about the prices, even for the short orange one that everyone likes, you'll be amazed at the different prices those will be.
Yep. And the price of we'll get to the orange ones in a sec, but the price of this one right here, this is telescope and mount, and it's called Dobsonian. All that refers to is the structure of the mount. It goes up, down, and around and around. This telescope type is called Newtonian, and this is the design that Isaac Newton got to work. So this telescope design is about 350 years old, and this telescope price is less than $300 usually. So not motorized, not tracking, not anything, but easy to move around, really easy to put together. And you're going to pay about $300, maybe a little bit less for this particular telescope. And like I said, we'll get to that one. John, your 10-inch.
Yes.
What's the, you want to give folks an idea of what that might cost?
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, my 10-inch is extremely old. It's a 22-year-old telescope. So when I bought it, it was $1,000. It was the first telescope that I purchased. And now you can see that it's shamelessly decorated with a bunch of stickers, because the tube is actually made out of cardboard. And not that it didn't hold up well, but it doesn't look very nice. So, and it also has straps. It's on this pier mount. I know it's a little difficult to see. It's an equatorial pier mount. So it was, I mean, like I said, I maximized the light gathering for my dollar, but at the same time, it wasn't exactly a beginner scope. It is, of course, a Newtonian Reflector. And I changed out the focuser because the focuser that it came with was substandard. So this is a Crayford focuser. So, you know, without adding too much to it, it's right around $1,000 or so. You know, but it's great for light collecting, and it's great for learning the sky, moving around manually. It does have a motor, so it will track. It's not a go-to scope, but it will track. But it's great for learning the sky and moving and star hopping, but it's not great for portability. It's heavy, it's bulky, it's tough to store, it's tough to move around. So that's the kind that you want to buy maybe later on down the line, and you want to leave it at home and use it in your backyard a lot.
What's amazing is 10-inch telescopes, like the Dobsonian version, like the 10-inch version of this one right here, you can definitely get for less than $1,000. So you're not buying a telescope for your investment purposes. They will depreciate as soon as you take them out of the box. But they will give you years and years and years and years of good use with very little maintenance usually, except for maybe putting a sticker or two on the outside of the tube. So Adriana, any other questions? Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I had to. The tube just got beaten up. It's not metal now. Most tubes are what, aluminum or some sort of alloy.
Yeah.
And although this material is great for maybe not expanding and messing with your views so much, it did get beaten up. So it's not really a good one to tell our viewers about, because they're not going to be buying something like this brand new right now. They're going to get all newer materials, metal tube, things like that, rings instead of straps. So, sorry.
Adriana, any other questions?
Yeah. I live near our dark sky reserve in Idaho. I'm looking at a 12-inch Dob, but I was wondering what a similar Cassegrain would be like. Any thoughts?
It would be a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Oh, you're talking. Okay, so to explain for folks, this type of telescope is similar to a Cassegrain, but a Cassegrain it's a telescope design that was perfected in 1672. So the light comes in. There's no lens at this end. The light comes in, bounces off the mirror at this end, comes back up. There's a secondary mirror here, and the light goes through a hole in the main mirror. And so that Cassegrain type telescope, your tube is going to be longer. And so it's going to probably be a lot more expensive. I would say if you can port around that 12-inch Dob, again, that just refers to the mount. It's a Newtonian telescope on a Dobsonian mount. If you can move that around, oh my goodness, that would just be spectacular in a dark sky reserve. I'm so jealous. So
Yeah, I wouldn't be looking around for something else if I
yeah,
was in that location with that telescope.
yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I think the rest of us are going, oh, the angels are singing. I want to be able to look through a big telescope right now. So anyway, all right. Any other questions before we move on to the orange ones and why we all have one?
So, all right. So let's move on to the orange ones and why we all have one. I also have one,
Because of the color.
Yeah,
because of the color.
So
all the aesthetics, really.
right.
I'm
So
kidding.
anyway, go ahead.
So I also have one. It is not right next to me right now because it's in the other room and it's heavy. Also because I knew everybody else was going to have theirs out, so I didn't feel the need. But let me tell you a little bit about it. I will have some other people model some of the stuff I'm talking about if you guys would be so kind. All of us have the same brand and model of the telescope, but we have them in different sizes. So this telescope is made by Celestron and the model is called Nexstar SE. John and I have the 5 SE, which means that it's a 5-inch mirror across. Michelle has the Adler's 6 SE, that's a 6-inch mirror, and Andy and Mark have the 8 SE. The difference between all of these is the diameter of the main light gathering element, the main mirror, which I just told you about. So the bigger the light gathering part, the bigger that mirror is, the brighter that your image is going to be. The telescope also has a mount that will allow it to track objects, so follow objects across the sky, because whatever you're looking at in the sky is not going to stay in the same place over the course of the night. As the Earth rotates, the sky moves. So especially if you are doing any kind of photography, it is very cool to have a tracking mount that will follow the object that you're looking at across the sky, but also it's nice because then you don't have to keep moving your telescope. Once you align it to the sky, it has a menu of objects to choose from as well that you can find using the hand paddle. Can somebody model the hand paddle for me?
I got it right here.
Wow, isn't she lovely?
It is.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm giving mine a little bit of a spin here.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. It's got a motorized mount. And Michelle can tell you a little bit more about that, huh?
Yeah, just one thing about these motorized mounts. The telescope plus the mount together, you expect to pay 2 to 5 times more for this type of telescope than, say, your comparable Dobsonian type.
Plus
So
the battery pack.
yeah, and a battery pack.
Yeah.
Exactly. I have a very similar one too, because you need to either fill the base with batteries or you need to plug it into a what's called a power tank. And
Yep.
I highly recommend the power tank because you can get hours of use out of one charge of those power tanks, and they're rechargeable. But this particular mount is the particular type of telescope is really great, but it is expensive. So let's see, who haven't we talked to in a bit? John, you have this telescope. What do you like about it, and what don't you like about it?
This was my first go-to telescope. So I loved what I could see with the go-to. Of course, I had to learn the sky a little bit with my reflector, before, so I could do alignments. But once you learn the sky a little bit, now I can find with the go-to those faint sky objects that I couldn't star hop to in a light polluted area. So that was a huge selling point. Plus, it's portable. I could pick it up with one hand. I could grab it and go wherever I want to.
You
And
can pick it up with one hand?
Yeah.
that's one of the
Wow.
reasons I got it.
You can't pick up the 8 with one hand.
No.
I can't pick up the 5 with one hand. I just want the record to show.
Let me see. Nope. Nope. Not gonna do it. I mean, I can, but it's really tippy. So anyway, go ahead.
But it's a great. It's kind of a grab and go scope. It's compared to the reflector, which is 110 pounds put together on the pier mount. This is so much easier to just grab and take outside. So I love that feature of it. I loved that I had a go-to scope. Unfortunately, I found there were a number of drawbacks. I don't know if you want me to talk about those now, but
Why don't you give us one? Go ahead.
okay. So for instance, this mount, and I don't know if this is true of all the Celestrons, but the mount doesn't move manually in the azimuth. So I can move it in the altitude, but it has to be powered in order to move in the azimuth.
Yeah.
And that was a big disappointment. I didn't do enough homework. Long story, but yeah. So when I bought the scope, it's a great scope, but the power is a little flaky, both battery and plugged in. The hand controller died on me after about 1.5 years, and I had to buy a new one. They used to have a buyback program. They eliminated that. But there are little tweaks you can do, like Velcro everywhere on your hand controllers, so because it's annoying to hook those in. So you just put little Velcro spots everywhere you want to hook up your hand controller. When it's dark, you don't have to fiddle around and find the spots. I mean, you can tweak and customize all your scopes, but
I've just learned something.
A great idea.
I learned that trick from the Adler astronomy community. So, it's I'm just paying it forward.
Wow, that's awesome. Mark, I know you've used yours with large groups of people and
Yes.
long lines of people. Can you give me one pro, one con with this telescope that you found?
Yeah, so let me think of a pro and a con. So I mean, just the reason why I went with this one, and I mean, you give, like you said, with telescopes, you get what you pay for. I have a daughter, and kids are fluent in computers. So a telescope that I could give her the controls and say, I didn't even have to give her the manual, just give her the controls, turn it on, and she was able to just find her way. She was able to make it work without anyone having to explain it to her, because it all just makes sense. So that's, you pay for it. The computer, the go-to on telescopes is not cheap, but an advantage at home is that she's able to use it way easier. And the attention span of kids is not always the greatest. So if you're outside with a telescope and you're like, oh wait, I'm going to find this planet for you, and you take 30 minutes trying to center it, you're going to lose the kid. But if you can find it or have them find it, it's way easier. The downside I have with it, I'm okay with the power. Just have to make sure I keep things charged. The downside I have with this telescope, and I didn't click it on. But so if we haven't talked about finder scopes on telescopes, I don't know if someone has a finder scope sitting there, but a finder scope is just like a mini, I mean, some of them it's like a mini telescope. It doesn't, but the one that Michelle's showing up is similar to what I have. And it clicks on the side, and so I won't go into the detail on it, but you don't want to try to find something in a if Michelle wants to go in more, she can, but you don't want to try to find a deep sky object with your telescope. You want to find it with a finder scope, cleverly named, because if you're using magnification, it's impossible to find something in the dark sky. So you use a finder scope. Lots of finder scopes are just think of it like a scope on a rifle. It's just a crosshair, and it's just an X, and you look and you find it, and that's great. Mine is a laser, and I believe all of the orange tubes, aptly named, come with the laser version, which I think is really cool, and kids think is really cool. They are battery powered. with one of those really small, strange circle batteries.
The watch batteries.
And like I just said, finding things in the night sky is really, really hard without a finder scope. So I have had plenty of nights where I've gone outside to look at something cool, and I realize that the battery is dead on my finder, and I go back inside because I know it's just going to be frustrating to try to find it without a finder. Yeah. So that would be the downside, is having to make sure you have batteries with you and keep the thing powered up, and a screwdriver, because I think in all of these you have to actually unscrew it, I think, to get to the battery. Actually, mine, I have to unscrew it to get to the battery. Is there a clip on yours?
Yeah, this just flips off. It's a little door that flips off.
But as for showing with groups, yeah, some nights I've had one. I mean, my biggest night I had about 350 people looked at my telescope in about an hour and a half. The only way that is possible is because the telescope was tracking the object for me and stayed in view. If I had to keep going and adjusting the telescope between every other person who came to look, that would have taken way too long. And now, depending on the object in the sky, I mean, it's been a little bit since I've looked at Jupiter. Certainly looked at Jupiter without tracking, but you look at Jupiter, that's going to fade from view in a minute and a half or something like that. It's going to slide right across your view. So if I'm trying to show it to a bunch of people in a crowd and I have to keep turning it, I can do that, but it's frustrating.
Andy, any pros or cons you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, for my 8-inch, I think the biggest con for me is the weight. The 8-inch is almost too heavy for the stand, so it gets very wobbly and you have to wait for it to settle. Where the 6-inch that the Adler has, I've never had that problem when I used it for night events. But other than that, I think this is the one I use the most because it's the easiest to set up. I like the control panel because if I'm looking at the moon or planets, it has the solar system alignment where all I have to do is just align on either the moon or Jupiter, which is bright. And then I don't have to worry about doing 2 star alignment or anything like that. Although it's pretty good because I've used a 2-star alignment on the 6-inch next star at the Adler to look at Neptune on some of the events. So
Yep.
For our friends in Maryland, that 6-inch next star is probably great. If it works at the Adler for the sky there, it will probably work in Maryland as well.
Exactly right.
For the finder scope, actually what I did is I bought a $20 finder scope base, so that way instead of using the one that it came with, I do have an easy finder that I use. Or if I'm actually looking for deep sky stuff, I'll use one of my finders from my other telescopes, like the 10 by 50, so I can really star hop a little bit, even though it's computerized. Sometimes you still need to make sure you're not off, because if you're off by a little, then the eyepiece, you won't see that deep sky object, but if you can see a fuzzy one in a bigger finder scope, it helps. So a small little plate. So I guess it's learning how to overcome some of the cons when you have them and you don't know what they are until you've used them for a while. I mean, one of the earliest times I used it, I had the little notches, the arrows. I didn't line them up. So I couldn't track anything. I couldn't find anything because the telescope was upside down. So you also have to kind of learn how to have it aligned, set up, so that way when you are teaching it where it's at, I think that's going to be probably the biggest learning curve anyone will have with a computerized telescope.
Yeah.
Go for it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, just real quick, one of the other advantages I found, I didn't realize it when I got it, and it took me a while to realize. One of the other advantages, and this depends on where you live, if you live somewhere that's cold, some of the best stuff you can do for stargazing is during the winter, because you get those clear, crisp winter skies with low humidity. But it's cold. So so I remember, I don't know, a little over a year ago, there was that great blood red moon. There was that great eclipse. And it was in Chicago, it was like 0 degrees that day. And I put my telescope outside and I set it on the moon and I set it to track and I went inside. And then I came out to take a look again and then I went inside. And I didn't have to adjust it. I knew that when I came back outside, I was still going to be looking at the moon. That was an advantage to the GoTo that I didn't realize when I bought it, was if you live somewhere where it's really cold, or I suppose really hot, if heat bothers you, cold, if it's below 60, I'm freezing. So it's very handy in cold weather.
Yeah, we won't talk about that lunar eclipse where 5 minutes before totality it clouded up at the Adler Planetarium. So yeah.
Wasn't that the one where it snowed
what,
as
yeah,
well?
yeah,
There was
and
snow there was snow on the ground, wasn't there?
yeah, it snowed. It snowed sideways that day. Came right off the lake. Not that I'm bitter or anything.
Remember that.
But I can think of one pro across all the across both of these telescopes is 6 inches. If you want a sweet spot size to start with, 6 to 8 inches is your sweet spot. If you want to talk about a con, 2 cons with this particular telescope that you're gonna get with several other computerized motorized telescopes. And that is sometimes you actually have to know what you're looking at in order to align the telescope. Some of them, I mean, if you pay enough money, it will know everything, but you have to know, oh, it'll start off at a star, and then it'll say, oh, here's this other group of stars that you can go to align to. Well, you have to tell it which one you're going to. You have to know which one it is. And so you have to know a little bit about the sky to start with. So that it's a reason to learn, but it can be a con, which is why I wouldn't necessarily make this my first telescope. The other con is exactly what I think it was. I think John showed it. He was able to do this, which can happen during your observing. Someone can actually grab a hold of the eyepiece and move the telescope.
Yeah.
And if it moves off of alignment, you have to start over. And that could be really annoying if you're like Mark and you have 300 people in line, or even your family around and little kids who want to look through the telescope and you have to start the alignment process all over again. So that can be a con. It won't stay rock solid pointed at everything you want to look at.
Yeah.
So
Can I just add something to that solid factor? My 5-inch can't handle accessories. So I don't know about the 6-inch or the 8-inch, but a small camera, even an iPhone on an adapter, this 5-inch can't handle that. It also can't accommodate 2-inch eyepieces. So, I mean, I loved it as a go-to, but
when I had the 6 or whatever it was, that's what I started with recently, and I immediately, because I wanted to take pictures, so I immediately tried to attach my phone to it. I got a great little clip-on thing, and the right kind of phone. And as soon as I put it on, I clipped it right on there, and I'm like, "This is gonna be great," and immediately went down. The 8-inch holds my camera.
Yeah,
it'll hold my camera, but the six I had definitely did not.
I've put cameras on this 6-inch, and I have to slide the tube. You have a little bit of leeway in where you can put the tube, so you can slide it forward or backward on the mount here. But because it's only held on one side, there are some of these, it's called a fork mount. It's held on both sides. That provides even more stability. So that might be an improvement in a type of telescope you might want to look for. But you can move this forward a bit, but also it may limit the things you can look at. You're kind of limited. You can't look at stuff like directly overhead, because if you put a camera back here, it may run into your mount. I've had that happen. And so it's annoying. It's not a problem, but it is annoying. In terms of one of these telescopes, we'll just spend just a second on these Newtonian reflectors on the Dobsonian base. By the way, it is pretty portable. So yeah, this is the Dobsonian base, goes around, up, down. And the problem with this is it doesn't track at all. So if you want to put a camera on here, you kind of have to either move it yourself or let whatever you're looking at drift across. And so this isn't great for photography if you want to get some of those deeper sky objects. For the moon, sticking your cell phone up to the eyepiece, we've all done that, and we've done it to great success. But that's a drawback if photography is one of your things that you want to do. But in terms of the telescope itself, we use this all the time. As you can see, this is one of the telescopes we use for scopes in the city. So this is one of our favorite telescopes to use. So
And if you really want to do like great, for like if someone's watching now, I don't know if who's watching, but there are people watching now who really want to get into the imaging and they really have great cameras and they're just prepped, but they need the telescope part. Correct me if I'm wrong on it. I said because I only have the one kind, so I sometimes mix them up. But if you really want to do the best imaging, you need the equatorial because you need it to move. To be able to move on an angle, whereas this telescope you won't notice it because it's moving very slowly, but as it's moving, it's not moving on the diagonal, it's moving right up, right up, right up. It's going up like these little stairs. So it doesn't matter if you're just amateur, just playing in your backyard, taking some good images, get your camera pointed up to image. But if you're watching this thinking, I really want to take professional, amazing planetary images, you don't want the mount that's going to move like that because that's not how the objects in the sky are moving.
Right, that does answer one of the questions that we actually got. Somebody asked, is the Celestron Nexstar 4SE a good choice for astrophotography? If you're just taking some fun pictures and not super concerned with the outcome, sure. But like he said, if you're doing some fancy stuff, you're going to want something on an equatorial mount.
Like if you want to sell pictures, if you want to, do that, you're going to need the equatorial. I mean, I've taken I've used this telescope with that mount and either a special camera that I was able to get from the company or with my cell phone to take some really good pictures of Jupiter, some really good pictures of Saturn. You can see the rings great. You can see the storms and the cloud patterns on Jupiter. I mean, really great pictures for just sitting in your backyard, but it's nothing that I would try to market anywhere. That I see the pictures online. I see the picture professional images are taking, and they're not taking it with this.
Great.
Any other questions before we go on?
Last one that I see, does the Nexstar that everyone has have an attachment that can broadcast on a monitor, laptop, or tablet?
No, except if I put a camera in. So my camera's over there, but one of the cameras that I use, you would attach it where the eyepiece goes here, and then that can plug into, I use a laptop, so I can plug it into the laptop and then I can just share my screen with that. So that's the easiest thing I've found. Has anybody else used any of the cameras or anything? John, you're nodding.
Yeah, go for it.
No, go ahead, Mark.
No, I use the next image color burst. I don't remember what it's called, but it is from Celestron, and you put it in, you replace the eyepiece with it. The trick with that is that you're kind of locked into the magnification that the camera is. So some things are going to be kind of good to look at and some aren't. But I've used that. It works great. You plug it into a laptop. It's great. I've also used my cell phone, plugged it into a laptop, or just broadcast. I broadcast to Zooms from my phone. I flipped my phone up to my telescope, pointed at the moon, and gone live on a Zoom that way.
John, you've done Facebook Live, right?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing that Mark is talking about, just using Facebook Live and an iPhone connected to a Zoom eyepiece. So, you have the flexibility there. Again, the Nexstar, not great for that. I really have to kind of support it if I'm going to do that. I need to use like the Meade that's off camera right now, or one of the other telescopes that can handle the camera mount. But the only problem with things like Facebook Live is that it distills down the camera resolution, I think, to like 720p. So I can't show any dark sky objects. It's more planets, moon, stuff like that. But it's quick and easy.
Yeah.
You just stick.
It's pretty good for the moon. It's pretty good for the moon. It's going to work pretty good for the moon.
Or solar,
Yeah.
Speaking of images, I do have some to expect. Let me share those real quick. So I took all these images with this Nexstar 6 with a camera attached, and so this is one version of the moon, and we can zoom in a little bit. Because this is with just the camera in it. You can get what's called a focal reducer that actually makes your image smaller. because whatever you're looking at is actually too big for showing the whole thing on the computer chip. So so this is without a focal reducer on the camera. So this is a pretty good view of the moon, I think. This is a picture of Mars that I took just about a month and a half ago. So not too bad. You can see an ice cap. But also I want to show you, this is what to actually expect. This is lots of shimmeriness. We've all seen that. It's called seeing. It's not just the telescope, it is the air that you're looking through and what the properties are of the air. If it's moving around, jumping around a lot, whatever you're going to look at is going to move around and jump around a lot. And then here we've got Jupiter, and you can see the great red spot right there. Notice the size of these things. These are not Hubble Space Telescope quality images. Only the Hubble can give you Hubble Space Telescope quality images. But I wanted to show you a little bit of what to expect. And here's Saturn. So again, not too bad. I can see a little bit more detail with my eye than I can with a camera. That is a little bit of a drawback, but it's not too bad. And again, you can kind of see a bit of the shimmeriness that you get with the sky. But it's just going to be the property of the sky that you've got. So anyway, so there we go. Just wanted to show our friends some images. All right. So last chance, everyone. We've got, oh, Adriana, any other questions before we go on to the wrap up?
No, let's move on
All
to
good? Awesome. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. We're going to go round robin, going to go around the room. Of the telescopes that you have, or a telescope that you've used or looked through, something that you really want to say, first time telescope buyer, the one I would get is fill in the blank. And Andy, we're going to start with you. Which one would you recommend to our friends out there?
Yeah, and that's a hard one, because when I do the telescope facilitating, I kind of ask, what is it for? It's like, if it's to get the kids involved, or make sure the kids are still going to like it after a month or two with the attention spans, I usually go with the Dobsonian, because you get the most for the price, and you can get a nice 6-inch or even up to 8 inches with under $400 in many cases. Where if it's someone who's more adult and maybe coming back to the hobby, then I really do suggest the Next Star. But what I really also suggest is I go on to Google and say, okay, here's your neighborhood astronomy club, or the one that's closest to you. Talk with them as well, because you can kind of share. I bet some of the things that we kind of learned about our telescopes, if we kind of went to astronomy clubs or went to a star party, we probably would have found those out, and probably still got the same ones we got. But anytime you can have an opportunity to touch one of these, because all of them are online now, so you really don't know how big it is or how heavy. My 10-inch Dob that I bought because I wanted as much. Well, I drove a Mustang when I had that. The telescope was in my passenger seat, and the base was in the back, because nothing fit in the trunk or the hatch. So I couldn't take anyone else out with me. It was just me and the telescope, wherever I went. But, so I guess you gotta look at, where are you taking it out to as well. But I would say Dobsonian, or if you do the Next Star, I really like those. I think they're really easy to use, and it can help out a lot of people keep with the hobby.
That's a great point. Make sure whatever telescope you get, it can fit in the car that you have. Case in point, the telescope in the back corner there, that's the one that I built a little over 20 years ago. I made the mirror at the Adler Planetarium in our optical shop. For the longest time, we didn't actually have a car that could move that thing. So we now do. We have a hatchback. I specifically got the hatchback so I could move that telescope. Not that we do it often, but I can if I want to. So anyway, John, which telescope would you recommend to our lovely viewers?
I agree with Andy. As far as the beginners go, Dob is great. Even a truss Dob, and we didn't have one of those for an example, but the ones the Adler has, the trusses that are a little bit collapsible, help you transport them a little bit. They kind of compress the footprint. And so pardon me?
I just wanted to mention what what you meant by that. So instead of a solid tube, there are trusses, there are posts in between this part and this part. There's empty space in here. And so you can collapse down this part of the telescope into the bottom part just to make it smaller to move. And so we do have one of those, we just don't have it here. So anyway, but that's what we mean by a truss tube telescope. So go ahead.
Might make it a little bit more expensive, but I like the idea of the truss, to compress it, to move it. But definitely Dobbs, they're nice, they're easy to use for kids, maybe tabletops. And then if it was somebody that was looking to get something more advanced for their first scope, I'll throw it on camera since it didn't make it yet. But the 8-inch, like you said, the 8-inch range, 6 to 8-inch range, but the dual support. This is a Meade LX200. This is the one I use all the time, and so, but it's a first scope for somebody that's going to do something a little bit more advanced. Otherwise, I would say the Dobsonian, maybe a 6 or an 8.
Awesome. Mark, which one would you recommend to our viewers?
Yeah, every time I love this telescope, obviously I wouldn't have it if I didn't, but every time I load this telescope into my car, drive across town to a park, drag it across the park, set it up, then drag it back to my car and take it home. That night, whatever night that is, I end up sitting on my phone scrolling through trying to figure out if I should have a truss Dobsonian instead. So that I just wish I could roll a small telescope with me and still get a good view. So I kind of wish I had one of those too. So I suppose that would be a place that I would love to start. They aren't cheap, but I would wish I had one of those. So
Adriana?
Team Dobsonian has too many people on it, but in any case, remember our small friend here? I am going to make the case for this guy. Here's why. Number one, do you live in a place with lots of stairs where you have to walk down the stairs? It's terrible. Get something lightweight. Also, it just needs to sit on a table. I have a folding table that I take with me when I take this guy out. I set it up, I sit it on the folding table. It is super easy to set up. It is lightweight. It's got like a decent enough size mirror for you to see planets, the moon, all the kinds of stuff that you're going to look at as a beginning observer. And it is easy to learn how to use, which you can't say the same for something like a Celestron Next Star, where it's going to go to places, but not if you don't know how to align it. Yeah. So if I were recommending something for somebody starting out, this is a great idea. If you don't have the ability to carry a telescope or a table or something that you can set this onto, they also do make this same telescope with an actual tripod mount if that would work better for you. But this one is so light and so easy to use. So that's what I would say.
I would say if I had to choose for a very first telescope, it'd be this guy, the 6-inch Dobsonian, or a 4.5 to 6-inch tabletop. They make 6-inch versions of those tabletops as well.
We do have we do have a couple of, I think, 4-inch tabletops at the Adler too that we like. Somebody said, what is the name of the telescope that we're showing? This one is an Orion Sky Scanner 100. We also have at the Adler an Orion Star Blast, which is just a little bit, it's the same setup, but it's got a little bit of a wider mirror. So that'll allow you to see things that are a little bit dimmer in the sky. It'll make them a little bit brighter so you can see them easier. I would recommend that too in a heartbeat.
And good point that the different manufacturers, there are some main manufacturers out there, Celestron, Orion, we're big fans of theirs and we have their stuff. Doesn't mean that all the rest of them aren't good. It's just we tend to keep coming back to some of those. But you mentioned the Star Blast. Several public libraries in Illinois and around the country have telescopes available for checkout. So if you have a library card through your public library, check to see if your library is checking out telescopes. Lake County, Illinois has a lot, and they're starting to filter into a few other areas in Illinois. New Hampshire, anybody out there? You guys have a lot, because that's where this started. But check online and see if your local library has one. And if they don't, see if they could get one. And that way you can, and usually the telescope they lend out is a Star Blast. It's a modified Star Blast telescope. So tabletop, 4.5 inches wide, really good. By the way, Adriana, I wasn't planning on doing this, but someone asked, could you take your eyepiece out of your telescope? So someone mentioned eyepieces. We weren't going to talk a lot about accessories because we would be here for 3 more hours if we did. But if you're wondering if you need to buy lots and lots of different eyepieces, the answer is absolutely not. Start off with maybe 2. And the 2 that we have, I really, really, really like this one. So it is a 25 millimeter eyepiece. And so that's the focal length of the eyepiece. And Adriana has the 12 millimeter.
Nope, I've got a 15.
Sorry, 15 millimeter. Sorry. And they're made by Agena Astro Products. And I personally love these eyepieces. They're nice wide view. Can you show the top of your view? Yep, there you go. Nice wide view to look through. Mine is a lower magnification one. Adriana's is the higher magnification one. The lower the number on the side of the eyepiece, the higher the magnification will be. Magnification is not inherent to the telescope itself. It depends on the eyepiece that you put in. And there's one other thing it depends on, but we don't have to go into that. But the key is, don't get that set that has like 6 or 8 eyepieces. You don't need it. You will need like 2 eyepieces max. John, how many do you take out? Any eyepieces you take out usually?
I kind of cheat. I use one zoom and it pretty much takes care of it all night. Or if I'm using the binos, I have 2 zoom eyepieces for the binos.
Mark, how many eyepieces do you take usually?
I used to use the zoom, but now I bring out 3. I bring out, like, depending on what I'm looking at, I bring out a 12, a 25, and a 40.
Okay, so as those numbers go higher, the magnification is lower. So he wants a wide view, low magnification down to a higher magnification. Andy, do you have any favorite eyepieces?
About 3 as well. I usually have a 24 for the wider views, and then if I'm looking at planets, I'll go down to an 8 millimeter or so, because after a while you can't magnify anything else because it'll look like a big mush ball in the sky.
Yeah, so you can't resolve it. Yeah.
Exactly right. So there you go. All right, Adriana, any last minute questions before we sign off for tonight? This has gone so late, but we've gotten some great questions. So anything else?
That's all we've got.
All right. Well, there are 2 other resources that we can recommend, and I've got them right here. And they are our friends, Astronomy Magazine and Sky and Telescope Magazine. Sky and Telescope especially specializes in telescopes. It's in the name, but they often have reviews. Both of them often have reviews of the latest and greatest equipment. And so you may want to check the magazines. Again, your local public library may have a subscription to both of these, or just get a subscription. It's not that expensive. This is also really great to get for the sky observer in your family, hint, hint, for gifts and other ideas. If it might take a while to get the telescope, get the magazine, because they can read that while they're waiting for their telescope. So, all right. Any other last minute things, Adriana?
Yes, let us know how we did. We'd love to get some feedback from you. We've got Aubrey posting the link in the chat for our feedback survey. It'll only take a few minutes. If you wouldn't mind doing that, it'll help us make our shows even better. And you can send us suggestions for future show topics, stuff that you're curious about that you want us to talk about. So you'll also get to it via a link in tonight's program description if you cannot find it in the chat.
And the dog you hear in the background is John's dog, Sagan, which reminds me today is Carl Sagan Day. He would have been, how old, John?
What was he born in 36?
Yeah, born in 34. He'd be 86.
86. He would have been 86 years old today. So happy birthday to my he didn't know it. I didn't know him, but the guy who got me interested in astronomy was Carl Sagan. So happy Carl Sagan Day to absolutely everyone out there. John, Mark, Andy, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was a blast. We hope you guys had a lot of fun. And to our viewers, our next show is Monday, November 30th at 7 p.m. Central. And we're going to have our roundup of the wintertime sky. So the stars, constellations, and other neat things to look for then. Has some of the best stuff to see, including a cool meteor shower in January. So don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Thank you for joining us tonight. Andy, Mark, John, thank you. Adriana, thank you as always. Again, we will see you in 3 weeks. So it's the Monday after Thanksgiving. We will see you then. Thank you so much, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you.
great night.
Have a good
Bye.
night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.